and lots of things are going on. So we will talk about that. First of all, the 135 crashed over friendly territory. But what do you know about that?
Well, I'm just seeing that news as well. I don't have any details. It's very disturbing. Those are the same tankers that I used to refuel off of, and obviously, that's they don't have ejection seats, so you have to assume that the worst could possibly happen there. And again, looking for details, just praying for those the air crew, the pilots, all the folks that are on board that airplane. And as we get more details, we'll certainly share that. But,
okay, we'll talk about some other things here too. But if you don't mind, I was thinking about this. You've been in combat, and what must go through the mind of a pilot engaged in this war that's going on?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of things, especially, let's just start with the air refueling piece. I mean, you have to have fuel, and I was in many situations where your fuel's running out. You want to find the tanker to get the fuel. You don't want to have to divert into Baghdad or somewhere like that, and worst of all, you don't want to have to run out of fuel. And so, that's just kind of the basic thing that separates our Air Force from every other Air Force in the world, is that we have that capability with that global reach of refueling. So when you actually get into the combat situation and you're doing the mission and the job is being performed, I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, not the least of which is just these mid-air collisions that could happen, which is what it kind of is looking like on that particular thing. But then, there's other, potential for other aircraft. Obviously, we've destroyed Iran's Air Force. There is the surface-to-air threat from missiles and AAA and other weaponry that's being shot at you. And so, there's a lot of things that are going on in this complex environment, deconflicting your flight path, making sure you're not going to hit anybody else, making sure that, the enemy is destroyed when you're in contested airspace, which luckily for the last 25, 30, 40 years, we've been able to establish air superiority very quickly. That's not always going to be the case, and that's why it's so important for us to reinvest in our Air Force, because in the case of the Chinese Communist Party, I mean, they are investing heavily in surface-to-air and air-to-air machines and weapons and technology. So complex environment, a lot can go wrong. In the heat of the moment, you're trying to do things to meet timelines, and that sometimes forces you into a situation that's a lot riskier or a lot more dangerous than normal, than training and other other times.
It seems, though, to me, and of course you are Lieutenant Colonel, but it seems to me that the operation in Iran is going well.
By all accounts, it is. Militarily, there were several objectives: destroy their ability to shoot missiles, destroy their navy, destroy their nuclear program, and destroy the proxies that levy terror throughout the region. And every account that we are getting is suggesting that is going very, very well. I mean, they're still firing missiles into cities and into ports and into airports around the region, and they obviously still have proxy groups throughout the Middle East that are capable of sowing terror. That's going to take a longer time. But when it comes to their Navy and when it comes to their nuclear program, everything suggests that we're on track. But this is not an easy conflict. It's not an easy thing to just have a regime change. As we know, the son of the Ayatollah Khamenei has now taken over. He's got a big target on his head. But despite the fact that the Iranian people hated the regime, there still is a sense of nationalism, that they're proud of their country. They just don't like this regime. That doesn't mean that they're just going to one day flip into this civil war to take over and establish a new and freer regime. They haven't done that in 47 years. So there's a lot riding on this, and it is going well from a military and an operational standpoint. but the bigger goals of having a free Iran that does not terrorize the world, I think we're still a long way off from that.
Are you confident, Congressman, that this will end relatively soon in light of what you just said, and will we get to boots on the ground?
You know, I think that we can achieve military objectives pretty soon, and then, you know, to the point of having boots on the ground. I mean, I think that's another step that we're not quite ready for. I don't know what is going to achieve the rest of those goals, because I think it's going to be a combination of things, and those are further discussions. But 100%, the president made the right choice at the right time to rid the world of this terror threat. Can you imagine if the world's largest sponsor of terrorism got nuclear weapons? He's willing to shoot missiles into every one of his neighboring cities. What would they have done with nuclear weapons? So this is 100% the right call, but that doesn't make it easy, and we should definitely remember that it's not easy.
All right, one of our listeners has sent a text to us, Congressman, and Steve Forkran. Steve tells us that they are burying his father-in-law today, served 20 years in the Air Force, 20 civil service as well. How does one apply for a flag that flew over the Capitol?
Well, first off, we're praying for Steve and his family. Thank you for the service of his father-in-law. And my office can take care of that, no problem. Pfluger.house.gov. Again, Pfluger.house.gov. And there is a specific box to click on that website to look for those the flags. We'd be happy to do that. And again, thank you so much, so deeply for the service of his father-in-law.
All right, 7:46 now on KWEL AM and FM. The price of oil, of course, is up. Oil reserves now are going to be released and whatnot. What are your thoughts on this overall?
Well, you know, you look at the oil futures market, and it's a little more steady. I mean, you know, there's I think a momentary shock into the 90s that we've seen. Let me just say, first off, before we even get into the pricing, thank you to the men and women of the Permian Basin for creating a situation in the United States where we're energy dominant, where we have the capability to provide for our needs. 15 years ago, we were not at 6.5 million barrels, and we've built to that point. And I know it's been a rough year, but thank you for that, because a conflict like this 40 years ago would have meant something completely different. So, yes, prices are up. I have stressed to the administration, both President Biden and the President Trump administration, this is why we need to stay in such a narrow band, a predictable band. You know, somewhere in that 65 to 85 is good for everybody. It's good for the economy. It's good for producers. It's good for predictability. We can continue to produce as much as we need, but that's why it's so important. I don't know that, you know, the fundamentals of the market have changed. I think the supply is still there to service demand of about 100 million barrels worldwide each day, but it's stuck over there in the Arabian Gulf because that Strait of Hormuz, I've flown over that. I've flown missions to protect our carrier strike groups. I've flown missions to protect the tankers and the commercial ships that come through there. So I know that area. It is a very strategic but very difficult strait to navigate. One that is very vulnerable to the Iranian attack right now. So I don't think it's a supply issue. I think it's a logistical issue of getting the supply where it needs to go and making sure that it's not going into the wrong hands for illicit money and things like that. So I think we're probably in for some higher prices, you know, in the near term, but it looks like in the long term that they are going to settle out, and my hope is that they'll settle out in that band where it benefits everybody.
Larry Fink the other day at BlackRock said he thought it would get down to about $50 eventually. So long term, I guess you kind of look long term here. Now, the International Energy Agency is warning the war in Iran is creating an oil crisis bigger than the 1970s. Now, you can believe what they say or not, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, again, believe what they say or not. You know, I think the crisis is in the ability to move that supply. We will know a lot more in the coming month, you know, when we really see what the effect and the impact on their production is. But let's remember, they have been using their oil to fund terrorism, to fund their own regime, to fund, they're selling it to the Chinese and the Russians. I mean, this is a regime that's operating with these dark tankers, and who knows what flag they're using and where we do know where it's going. But, it's one of those things where bringing that up to a transparent situation, I think we will find, we'll find more details out about what that looks like. But right now, the futures markets are pretty stable, in a reasonable band, and I'm not sure that it's going to get back down to 50. My hope is it's 65 to 85, that we stay in a good, predictable, but profitable band.
And we are 10 away from 8 o'clock with Congressman August Pfluger on KWEL. Thanks for tuning in. Another big news story domestically is the Save America Act and John Thune's lack of pushing this along and everything. And I realize this is a Senate issue, but what do you think is going to happen here?
Well, it is a Senate issue. We passed the SAVE Act over a year ago. They did nothing. Now we passed the Save America Act. I am told, and I talked to Senator Bill Hagerty from Tennessee yesterday about this very thing, but they are going to put it on the floor. This is such an important issue. You have to, when you register to vote, prove that you're a citizen, and when you go vote, show your ID. And it's pretty simple. And we were with President Trump this week on Monday, and this is his number one priority. In fact, he told us, he said, I'm not sure I'm going to sign anything into law until we get this passed. I'm not sure that we're going to do anything until we can move this. So, there's this question of whether or not they have what they call the filibuster versus the talking filibuster. Those are all Senate technicalities. They need to put it on the floor and debate it, and I dare a Democrat senator to come to the floor and tell their state why we shouldn't have somebody prove that they're a citizen and use their ID to vote. That's just ridiculous. So we are pushing this. I've been as the RSC chairman, pushing the Senate to do the right thing and to get this moving.
All right. Would the right thing then be to do get back to the kill the filibuster?
Well, the right thing is to pass it. So I'll leave that to the Senate. But this is why, again, Craig, as the Republican Study Committee chairman, we're looking at the fact that Democrats are basically unwilling to do much of anything. If President Trump cured cancer today, I'm fairly certain that Democrats would vote against it, which is sad to think that that's the position they're in. We need to use every tool we have available, so I'll leave that to the Senate. But for us, there's a tool called reconciliation where we pass things in the House that then unlock the ability for the Senate to pass them with not 60 votes, but 51. We should do that. We should use that. We should take advantage of that. Democrats did that when they had Biden and Pelosi and Schumer, so why are we not? And I've been pushing our Speaker of the House on this very, very hard.
All right. Congressman, we'll let it go at that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service in the military, too. We appreciate that very, very much. And I hope you have a good day. God bless.
Well, Craig, thank you, and thank you again to all the men and women of the Permian Basin who have given us energy dominance. You have given us not just the safety and security for our own economy, but also geopolitically to do the right things and not be afraid of the outcomes, like we were, 4 or 5 decades ago. But no longer are we. It's an honor to represent you, to go to Washington, D.C., and to be the biggest champion of American energy, of Permian Basin energy that there is. God bless everybody. I hope you have a great day.